The graveyard of Kallus Reach had not moved in 9,000 years. Not once. No drift, no decay, no signal. 300 dead human warships hung in that black field like teeth in a closed jaw, and every species that passed through had learned to pass through quietly. Today, one of them opened its eyes. It happened on a Tuesday, if Tuesdays still meant anything. Out past the Reach, a salvage crew from the Voss Trading Combine was cutting into the hull of a ship, designated only as Hull 114, looking for nothing more exciting than copper and old alloy. Their drill bit hit something that should not have existed inside a 9,000-year-old corpse. A heartbeat, slow, patient, waiting. The lead cutter, a Voss engineer named Threll, felt the vibration through his boots before his instruments registered it. He had cut into 400 dead ships in his career. He knew what dead felt like. This did not feel dead. He should have been afraid. Instead, he started laughing. And he could not explain to his crew why, and that was the first thing that did not make sense that day. This is the kind of story Humanity Revenge. HFY was built to tell, the kind where nobody is lying. And the truth is somehow worse than any lie could have been. Hull 114 had 3 reactor cores. Salvage manifests from 200 years ago. The last time anyone bothered to survey the Reach listed exactly 1. Nobody asked where the other 2 had come from because nobody noticed yet. That was the first impossible detail, and it would not be explained for a long time. Before we go further, if you're the kind of person who stays till the end of a story like this, hit that like button and subscribe to Humanity Revenge. HFY, this is exactly the kind of story we live for here. Now, back to what happened next. Threll reported the anomaly through standard channels, the way procedure demanded, the way 9,000 years of quiet had trained every species in this sector to do quietly, no alarms, no fleet movements. The last time anyone had triggered a fast response near the Reach, 3 centuries ago, the response had cost an entire Tholrak battle group. And nobody in this sector forgot lessons that expensive. The report reached an aging Tholrak fleet commander named Vask Idren, 1,100 years old by his species reckoning. 300 of them spent specifically watching the Reach for any change at all. He had built his entire career on the assumption that the Reach would never change. He read the report twice. He set down his cup of black tea, untouched, and did not pick it up again. Vask had read the surviving human logs, the ones recovered when the war ended. The ones his government kept sealed under classifications. That meant almost nobody read them. He remembered one line from the final transmission out of this sector, logged the day the human fleet went dark. It said, "We are not leaving. We are waiting for a better question." Nobody had understood what that meant. Vask had assumed, like everyone else, that it meant nothing. The last words of a dying civilization. Grasping for dignity, he no longer assumed that. He gave the order to scramble 2 cruisers to the Reach, not for offense, but to observe. He told nobody why he felt his hands had gone cold doing it. 2 days later, Hull 114's running lights came on. All of them. Across all 300 ships in the graveyard. In perfect synchrony like a held breath finally released. The Voss salvage crew, still docked against the hull, watched their monitors fill with status reports in a language their translators struggled to parse, not because it was alien, but because it was old, formal, military human, full of protocols nobody outside a museum had used in 9 millennia. Threll's monitor flashed a single line that his translator rendered, imperfectly as, Shepherd option, authentication required. Nobody on his crew knew what the Shepherd option was. Threll filed the term away in his head and did not open it again. The way you file away a sound in the dark, you cannot. Place and decide not to think about. It would matter later. Everything filed away matters later. The 2 Tholrak cruisers arrived to find 300 warships powered, silent and not moving. No weapons charged, no course set. Just waiting the way a door waits after someone knocks. Vask stood on his bridge and watched the sensor feed and felt something he had not felt in 300 years of watching this graveyard. He felt unprepared. Not for an attack, for a conversation he did not know how to begin. His communications officer, a young Tholrak ensign, barely 40 years old, named Ressa, who had said almost nothing since boarding, who had a reputation for being so quiet that senior officers sometimes forgot she was in the room, suddenly spoke. It was the first thing she had said in 6 hours. "They're not waking up to fight," she said. "Look at the power distribution. 60% of every ship's output is going to life support and cultural archive systems. Not weapons." She paused. "They're waking up to remember something." Nobody answered her. Nobody needed to. The room went very still. The particular stillness of people who have run out of things to say and know it. Vask opened a channel. He did not know what he expected. Static, maybe, a recorded warning. Instead, a voice answered, calm, low, unmistakably human, speaking the old trade tongue with an accent 9,000 years out of date. "This is Hull 114, formerly the long-range cruiser Patience. We have been asked a question. We are answering it. We mean no harm to anyone who has not harmed us." Vask asked the only question that mattered. "What question were you asked?" There was a pause, not a system delay, but something closer to a held breath, the kind a person takes before saying something true. Whether anyone still remembered why we built 3 reactors into a ship that needed one. Here is the part of the story that the old human war logs never fully explained. The part that the survivors of that war spent the rest of their lives trying to forget, and that the descendants of every species who fought it spent the rest of their history trying to understand. 9,000 years ago, humanity lost the war for this sector. Not slowly, not honorably. Their colonies fell in months. Their fleets were outnumbered 11-1 by a coalition that included, among others, the ancestors of the Tholrak and the Voss. The human high command did the math. The same cold math any competent commander does when the numbers stop working. And they made a choice that nobody in that war room wanted to make, and every one of them agreed to anyway. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They built 300 ships with a fraction of their remaining resources, ships designed not to win a war that could no longer be won, but to wait out one that had not yet been fought, a war none of them would live to see, fought by people not yet born, against a threat the coalition fleets did not, yet know existed and would not discover, for another 4,000 years. The 3rd reactor in every Hull-class ship was not for weapons. It was for time. Decades of slow, patient power, just enough to keep one system alive across 9,000 years, a single archive, holding everything. Humanity had learned about a thing called the Veil, convergence, a hive intelligence that had nearly ended 3 other civilizations before humanity's scouts ever found this sector, and that the coalition that defeated humanity did not know was already moving toward this exact region of space. Humanity had found the warning. Humanity had lost the war before they could deliver it. So they built something that could deliver it anyway, 9,000 years late if it had to be, and they sealed the only people who knew the whole truth into cryostasis aboard those 300 ships, and they waited. The Shepherd option was not a weapon. It was a promise. When someone finally asked the right question, not, "Why is this graveyard so quiet?" but, "Why did you build it this way?" the ships would wake, and the warning would finally be given to whoever was standing there to receive it. Vask Idren had asked the right question without knowing it. 300 years of staring at a graveyard, wondering why it never changed, had been, without his knowing, the slow act of asking. The emotional weight of what came next did not arrive as celebration. It arrived as silence. The kind that settles after something enormous has finally been understood. Ressa, the quiet ensign, sat very still at her station, her hands flat on the console, not shaking, just still. The way hands go still when a person realizes the size of something they only just started to grasp. Threll, back aboard Hull 114, found himself sitting in the ship's old crew quarters, looking at a row of 9,000-year-old personal effects still strapped down exactly as their owners had left them. Child's drawing, a cup that had never been refilled, A name carved into a bulkhead by someone who knew they would never see it read. He did not know why he found himself crying. He did not try to stop. This is exactly the kind of story Humanity Revenge HFY exists to tell. Not a story about humans winning, but about what 9,000 years of waiting costs the people who do the waiting and the people who finally understand what was bought with it. Nobody in the sector had a clear picture of what the Vial convergence actually was. And that absence of a picture was, in its own way, the most frightening thing about it. It did not negotiate. It did not conquer territory in any way a soldier would recognize. It simply arrived quietly, the way a tide arrives, and within months whole systems stopped answering hails, not destroyed, not visibly, just gone quiet in a way nothing ever came back from. 3 civilizations, long predating the Tholrak Voss. Coalition had encountered it and left behind. Nothing but archives full of unanswered questions. Humanity's scouts, 9,000 years earlier, had been the only ones to study it up close and survive long enough to write down what they learned. That single archive, carried inside 300 patient reactors, was now the only complete account of the Vial convergence anywhere in known space. The Vial convergence reached the edge of the sector 4 months later. By then, every government that had once fought humanity into near extinction had access to the warning humanity died, slowly and on purpose to deliver. The coalition fleets that assembled to meet the threat included Tholrak cruisers, Voss salvage ships repurposed for evacuation, and 300 human warships that had waited 9,000 years for exactly this moment, crewed by survivors who woke into a galaxy that no longer remembered their names but would never forget what they had done. Aboard the Voss evacuation convoy, a junior loadmaster named Burrell, no rank worth mentioning, the kind of name that never appears in official histories, spent the entire battle doing the only job he had ever been trained for, counting refugees onto transport shuttles, one family at a time, calling out numbers in a voice that did not waver even when the hull shook hard, enough to throw equipment off the racks. Nobody would remember his name afterward. He did not do the job to be remembered. Between the 9th and 10th shuttle, in the 60 seconds he had to himself, he found a child's shoe that did not belong to anyone currently aboard, and instead of discarding it, he tucked it carefully into a supply locker, in case someone came looking. Nobody ever did. He kept it anyway for years afterward without being able to explain why. The battle that followed was not clean. It was not a story with no cost. 40% of the human crews who woke from stasis did not survive the engagement that followed, having spent the very last of a strength they had been rationing across 9 millennia. Hull 114, the Patience, was among the ships lost, its 3 reactors finally giving out in the same hour the Veil convergence, broke apart and scattered, defeated by a warning that had been 9,000 years in the delivering. Vask Idren stood on the observation deck of his cruiser after it ended, looking out at where the graveyard at Kallus Reach used to be. It was emptier now. Most of the ships were gone, spent, finished. A handful remained, dark again, but differently dark, not waiting anymore, just resting. He thought about the cup of tea he had left untouched 3 months earlier, the day he first read the salvage report. He had never gone back and finished it. He found standing there that he did not want to. Ressa stood beside him, the quiet ensign who had spoken twice in this entire story and changed everything both times. She did not speak now. She did not need to. "Do you think they knew?" Vask finally asked. Whether anyone would still be listening after all this time? Ressa considered it for a long moment. "I think," she said, "they decided it didn't matter whether anyone would be listening. I think they decided someone should be ready to speak just in case. Before I close this one out, if this story stayed with you, drop a comment below. Tell me the moment that hit hardest. And if you know someone who needs to be reminded what humans are actually made of, share this with them. Humanity Revenge, HFY grows one story at a time. And this community is why we keep telling them, Now here is how it ended. What remained of the graveyard at Kallus Reach drifted quiet again, the way it had for 9,000 years, except now the silence meant something different. It was no longer the silence of something waiting to be asked a question. It was the silence of a question finally fully answered. Even patience has teeth.